Hey folks, this is Kelani. With BlizzCon well underway, we've got quite a lot to talk about and not nearly enough time to play Classic WoW. I'm really excited to talk about how Classic is shaping up, but what I really want to touch on right now is Zandalari paladins. We were told they weren't a thing. Excuse after excuse after excuse was given, but with the knowledge of our next pair of allied races being unlockable in patch 8.1.5, we also came to know that Zandalari trolls will in fact be able to wield powers of Holy Light to smite their foes in glorious fashion. Hopefully they've realised the error of the ways thanks to good reasoning and delving into the lore of the Zandalari, and not because of the new Hearthstone expansion which kind of shoehorns every single class into the troll empire, paladins included. That can't be why, surely. Moving on, we have a few interesting bits of information regarding the two allied races which will be joining our ranks in 8.1.5. A few new races are being introduced later on down the line that might make for some perfect allied races, and we finally have a preview of the new Goblin and Worgen models which have been promised time and time again, as well as a rough timeline for their debut. Let's jump right in and check those out first, because I'm sure many of you have waited long enough. With them being one of the latest additions to the playable race roster, it's no surprise that Goblins and Worgens were left with outdated models for the longest. When everyone else was getting patched up, they did look pretty good in comparison. It wasn't until literally every other race had a shiny new model that Goblins and Worgens out there were left feeling a little rough around the edges. New models have been a talking point for a while now, and we were finally promised some actual action on the matter in Battle for Azeroth. Well, I'm sorry to say that these new models won't be making it into the game with patch 8.1, or patch 8.1.5, or even patch 8.2. They're currently slated for way down the line in patch 8.2.5, but at least they have a deadline to work towards now. Both male and female of the Goblin and Worgen races will be receiving updated models to bring them back in line with everyone else, smoothing out the fine lines, a little more detail here and there, and probably some better facial rigging thrown in for good measure. If you take a good look at what we have in game right now, both races are actually a bit blockier than what I would have expected. I guess they are 8 years old at this point, but these little teasers we have are looking pretty good, at least by my standards. I don't really play Goblin characters or Worgen characters, but I would actually consider it for a future alt or two looking at these new models. Hopefully they translate well once you actually get them into character creation, but I would be pretty happy with these new models. If any of you are playing a Goblin or a Worgen, let me know what you think. Your opinion has more weight than mine ever will on something like this. Do you like what you see? It looks like the female Worgen have finally become a little less chihuahua-y, and I'm pretty sure when the female Worgen pictures went up, the crowd was very pleased indeed. I'm still kind of shocked they changed that one at the last minute in Cataclysm, but oh well, now you only need to wait until 8.2.5 comes around to play a Worgen female if that's what interested you back in Cataclysm, before the changes to their snout and teeth and face. Both races should be able to strut around Orgrimmar or Stormwind with pride after the updates go through, finally caught up with their polygon count, or whatever else matters these days when it comes to character models. With the older races out of the way, let's have a look at what lies in store a little closer to home. Both the Zandalari trolls and the Kul Tiran humans will be unlockable in patch 8.1.5, so you won't have to wait nearly as long to get your hands on these. At this point we know pretty much everything there is to know about these two races, except for a few key pieces of information which are going to be pretty important for anyone thinking about race changing. The first little gap that's been filled in is the specifics on their racial abilities, and the other little gap is the question of what classes can each of these races play as. We also have a little preview of their racial mounts, so we'll throw that in for some good measure. Let's check out the Zandalari trolls first. Their racials are a little ambiguous right now, which doesn't really help all too much, but at least we have a decent idea of what most of them will do. The first one is Regenerating. No surprise there, the regenerative capabilities of trolls are legend at this point, even if we don't see too much about it in game anymore. This seems to be a short duration heal over time spell, which could either be really useful or just not, depending on the values. Then we also have Embrace the Lower. Pray to a lower and gain their favour. I wonder if you get to choose that lower at any point, or if it's going to be a pretty simple secondary stat increase that picks a random stat whenever you use it, kind of like the Mag'har Orc racial. Again, could be cool, or just another throughput increase depending on how it actually works. Some racials that we can understand a bit better include City of Gold, loot additional coin from monsters, not too bad, I'll always take some free gold whenever I can get my hands on it. If we ever return to actually farming for gold, Zandalari trolls would be the kings and queens of that particular activity. And then we have Pterodactyl Swoop. Whistle up a Pterodactyl to glide you to the ground. If you ever wanted a free Goblin Glider, that kinda sounds exactly what this racial will do. If it's on a short enough cooldown, that could be a reason by itself to pick up a Zandalari troll. But my main question would actually be, are there any restrictions on this racial? Because Goblin Glider kits were getting up to a lot of nonsense before they were disabled in instances for the most part. If this ends up being a new Goblin Glider without limitations, that could open up the door for some interesting use of game mechanics. As for classes, the Zandalari trolls can play as druids, hunters, mages, monks, priests, rogues, shamans, warlocks, warriors, and of course, paladins. So no demon hunters or death knights, which is to be expected. None of the new allied races can be either of those classes, so the Zandalari tick pretty much every other box. The paladins will be happy. Let's have a look at the Kul Tirans, starting with their racials. They've got Haymaker, punch an enemy, stunning and knocking them back. That must be a pretty hefty punch, but then again, these guys and gals are pretty hefty humans. A stun and a knockback as a racial seems pretty powerful. That's probably going to be a short duration stun though. They also have Brush It Off, which I assume is an active ability to increase your versatility and regenerate damage. So it doesn't sound like a straight up heal, but more of a heal up X amount of damage taken in the last 5 seconds kind of thing. It could also just be a heal though, I don't know. Jack of all trades gives them an increase in all trade skills, which is kind of bonkers considering most other races that get that kind of bonus only get it to one profession, but I wonder if that will even make a difference in the long run with professions being a little lackluster. Child of the Sea allows you to hold your breath for longer and swim faster, definitely a handy racial to have if you don't have a water walking mount, and then Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner makes you resistant to both frost and nature damage. Not a bad roundup of racials there, but I think the Zandalari trolls definitely take the cool card with their free Goblin Glider. As for the classes a Kul Tiran can play, they have a few less options when compared to the Zandalari, with only hunters, warriors, priests, rogues, monks, druids, and shamans. Those last two are pretty huge though, human druids and human shamans for the Alliance. There's quite a bit of diversity being added in with these two races, which I'm always happy to see, as long as it makes sense of course. Forsaken druids would be a bit silly, and that's probably why they haven't been added into the game, but let's not give them any ideas. As long as it makes sense, I'm all for it, and these hardened humans definitely seem more in tune with some form of nature for the druids, and for a few of the elements for the shamans. The Zandalari trolls will be running around on a dino mount because nothing else would really make any sense, let's be honest, and just in case you were worried that the Kul Tiran humans were going to be given another horse to ride around on, well, I guess you were right to be worried, because the Alliance are getting themselves another horse. At least this one looks a little newer and has some cool armor to show off. The armored horses are always the best horses. But that's all of the new info for those two races, and remember that we'll see them in patch 8.1.5, so the patch after the one we're currently waiting on. Patch 8.1 has a release date of December 11th, so I would expect 8.1 to come around 2 to 3 months after that, so maybe sometime in March. They might do that one a little earlier, depending on how they want to release the raids. We'll have to wait and see. The Zandalari and Kul Tirans probably won't be the last races to be added into the catalogue of allied races though. We're always making new friends, and if we become super best friends with any of these new allies, then we might just have another playable race on our hands. In patch 8.2, we'll be delving deep into Nazjatar, where we'll meet all manner of sea creatures. The Horde will befriend some Gilbin, Sea Giants, and Makura, while the Alliance will find themselves in league with a deep sea tribe called the Uncohen, who look to be deep sea cousins to the Jinyu from Mists of Pandaria. Now I don't know about you, but playing as a Makura isn't really that appealing, but both the Gilbin and the Uncohen could prove to be pretty cool additions to the game. The Gilbin are basically just a variation on the Goblins, and we haven't really been friendly with any of them yet, so that opens up that door. The Uncohen could be a great new race to play with though, and it's one that we haven't really had access to yet. I know players have been asking for Jinyu as a playable race before, but they haven't really been that relevant recently. This new deep sea tribe is definitely relevant, and if they're an integral part of the Alliance breaking down the doors of Queen Ajara's palace, then they're certainly up there for consideration. There is another race that will be introduced to in 8.2, but it won't be in Nazjatar. Patch 8.2 will also be taking us to Mechagon, where we'll be knocking on the doors of a giant mecha gnome city, but the city proper is for the mecha gnomes who are loyal to their local king and enjoy replacing parts of themselves with machinery. Just outside the city, in a slum of junk, live some other mecha gnomes, some junker gnomes, who will be helping these chaps out in various ways, and when they learn that a very similar race is under the banner of the Alliance, it kinda makes sense that they might want to reconnect. So there's a few options in the future with races that we're going to meet and become friendly with, and perhaps perhaps most importantly, a few options for the Alliance, because we know at this point the Horde is probably going to get playable Vulpera before Battle for Azeroth is over, so the Alliance needs one as well. The Mechanomes, or the new fish people, would give the Alliance that race. And that's all we have for this video. New races, some allied race info, and some long overdue model updates for the Goblin and Worgen. Which race do you think fits best as a future allied race, for the Alliance side at least, seeing as, you know, Horde, Vulpera? What do you think of the Goblin and Worgen models? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on the screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.